Hey everybody, it's Landa. If you're new to my channel, I'm an artist and educator, and I love sharing tips and techniques in art education. Today we're going to paint 3 different bookmarks using analogous colors and also use some oil pastels and crayons to create some cool designs. So stick around, there's lots of learning, and let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is I want to talk about analogous colors. So if you haven't had any kind of color theory class in a really long time, don't worry. Analogous colors are actually pretty simple. So analogous colors are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So I call them friendly colors or neighboring colors. So if you take a look at this color wheel down here, so any of the colors that are next to each other. So for example, red to orange, purple to red, kind of yellow to green, so any part of that. So usually I think in terms of 3 different colors. And the thing about analogous colors is that when you use them together, they create a lot of harmony. So if you're struggling with different colors or how to choose a color, just start with analogous colors and it'll definitely look good. So that's what we're up to. In just a second, I'm going to show you what that looks like, but stick around because we're going to use those analogous colors in our masking and resist activity, and then also with the bookmarks. We're going to make 3 different bookmarks today. So let's go ahead and dig into those analogous colors. And just like I said earlier, the analogous colors are the neighboring colors. They are neighbors to each other on the color wheel. So any of these mixtures. So here I started with red. So red, orange, and then, or this is kind of a reddish orange to orange, right? So you could even start with like blue to purple, purple to purple, maroon, and red, any of those combos. So let's do, how about we do a green to yellow to start. So I'm going to use a little bit of Hooker's green just to show you. And usually these colors are, you know, you can mix these on whatever you're painting. So in our bookmark that we're going to make later, we're going to be using just analogous colors to create our beautiful bookmarks. So you take one of your colors, like my Hooker's green, and you add the analogous color, which here we're going to use yellow. It's next to each other, or they are next to each other. We're going to mix that up. And now we have our light green. So analogous colors, like I said before, they are great because they look really good together. If you're ever struggling with what colors to choose for things like jungle or leaves or things like that, these are, you would stick with analogous colors. So I'm gonna add a little bit more yellow to that. And I could even keep going. So I could go on and on and on with my yellow, and it would all be, they would all be analogous colors. So I could go to a darker green, I could go to a lighter yellow, and that would still be an analogous color. So let's do another round of color. So let's do that purple one. So purple to red is analogous, but you know, if you wanted to, you could even go to blue as long as purple is your kind of bridge color. So sometimes in my class I'll talk about bridge colors, like if I'm painting a sky, especially in the sky, because that's a great example of when you need to use analogous colors so that you don't make brown or a green sky. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. So I just used my purple, and to get to my red, I'm going to add a little bit of red to that. Let's scooch this a little closer. And I could even mix this on the surface. That's almost too red. So let's make it harmonize a bit more. There we go, that's pretty. And then I'll go with my alizarin crimson. And they look really nice because they're next to each other on the color wheel. So those are my analogous colors. And you go red to yellow. That's what I did kind of right up here. That's where you have orange in between. So anything that's next to each other on the color wheel is going to be a good way to harmonize your colors. And we're going to use analogous colors when we're making those bookmarks. So in just a second, we're going to play around with a little bit of oil pastel and crayon to create a resist in our painting, and then we'll paint with those analogous colors right on top of it. So it's a fun double exercise. So I just mixed in a little yellow into my cadmium red, and if I wanted to be more gradual, I could do a little bit more of that cadmium red, and then a little bit more yellow for the last one. So any color that, you know, maybe like think in terms of 3, like I said before, these are your analogous colors. So any color that's next to each other on the color wheel. So for example, these colors, these colors, these colors, and that can stretch as long as you have a bridge color. All right, so now let's use some of our analogous colors to play around with oil pastels and crayons to mask our paper and then create a design. So if you're not familiar with watercolor, you really can't lift the paint too much without leaving a little bit of the color on the paper. So there's a few different ways that you can kind of cover up the paper to either mask it and cover it entirely, or to kind of block something out. And so you can use tape, which we're going to use later, that'll block out a section of your paper, or you can use things that leave color like crayons and also oil pastels. So these will block the paper so the paint won't actually go on top of it, but it'll actually leave a little bit of color too. So that's what's really fun about using that, because they're waxy, it doesn't mix with the water. So let's take a look at that, and then we're going to move on to making some really colorful bookmarks. So let's move our analogous color sheet over here. There we go. Okay, so we're going to keep our analogous color sheet handy because I want to reference that in just a second. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use oil pastels and crayons to create a design, and then we're going to paint it using those analogous colors. So with oil pastels, just as I mentioned, you don't have to use, this is an oil pastel, you don't have to use white to still create kind of a masking or a resist effect. So I'll show you. So anytime you use an oil pastel, it just doesn't mix with that, with the watercolor, right? So oil and water don't mix, and it's the same thing with oil pastels and watercolor. So then you get this really cool look, and then obviously the higher the contrast, the more you can see that. So now I'm going to use purple, and look at that. Look at how vibrant that is. Very pretty. So that is an oil pastel. Now we are going to use both an oil pastel and a crayon because I just want to show you the difference. So really, you can tell in here, this is the crayon, this is the oil pastel. The only difference is that my oil pastel it's a little bit oilier. You can kind of feel it more on the paper. So if you're not into that, it could rub off. Where your crayon is not going to do that as much as the oil pastel. And then the other thing is that my oil pastel was a little dirty when I used it, the white one, and so you can see a tiny bit of that. But as far as which is a better tool for the resist method, they both work really well. It's really just, if you don't want it to rub off, then I would use a crayon. So just to show you what that looks like, I just drew with my white crayon, and I'll add a little bit. You can't even see it. That is the benefit to the oil pastels. You can see it a little bit more. Oh, there it is. It's like magic. It's a good activity for kids too. Have them play around with it. Okay, so there is, on the right, it's the crayon. On the left, it's the oil pastel. They both mask it pretty well. The oil pastel does a slightly better job. But let's go ahead and play around with it with our analogous colors. So let's start out with these 3 colors at the top, and we're going to use a white oil pastel instead of a colored oil pastel. but you could use, like I said, anything. Let's see. I wonder if I can do a star here. Can't really see it. That's tough. Okay. And you might want to just tip your paper a little bit so you can see the lines. Now the oil pastel is a little dirty, so I can just barely see it. Okay, let's see. Oh, there, you can see it a little bit. Not too bad. Okay, so in the right light, you can see it. Nice. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing with my crayon on this side. And in just a second, after we're done practicing, I'm going to show you some cool ways that you can apply both of these methods using the analogous colors and the crayons and the oil pastels to create some really pretty bookmarks. You can kind of see that already. Oh, this is very tough to see. No idea where my lines are with the crayon. So it might be kind of funny looking. Yeah, you can't really see that one either. Just barely. All right, great. So now what we're going to do, like I said, we're going to choose some of our analogous colors. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do purple to red because that just seems like it'll be more fun. And you'll be able to see it more. So let's do this. So when I did these examples, I worked really quickly and I painted the center and then I painted around it. So you're going to see me do that in just a second. So if I'm using my analogous colors, I might want to choose something really bright in the center, like how about orange? Let's do orange since I'm going to do purple. And I'm just going to guess where that star is. Look at that kind of show up. And I'm just doing some blobs. Now I'm going to start doing, I'm going to go around that star with my analogous colors. Put that here so you can see. Start with that purple. And this is just for fun, so don't worry if it all bleeds into itself. Or if one section bleeds into the next. That's totally okay. And in just a second, we'll do the same thing with the crayon, but with different analogous colors. And then you can apply this to, you know, you can do this so many different ways. You don't have to make a bookmark. You could make a card out of it. You could just paint for fun. So I'm just kind of going around it. Now the key to doing painting on top of oil pastels or a crayon, you can tell my paint's really wet. So it's not dry, it's not thin, it's watery. So now let's go ahead and see how our crayon resist turns out. How about we do a green center? And I have no idea, oh, there it is. Okay, that's helpful. It's kind of fun to see it kind of reveal itself. There. And let's see, how about we do blue? Let's look at our color wheel. So I'm doing mostly green, so let's do blue to this maroon color right here. These three colors around our green star. So it'll be blue, and then purple. And I'm overlapping the colors a little bit because that's, you want them to mix on the surface. To our red, so it turns maroon. You can pre-mix it if you want. Here, I'll do that. But now I have to go back. I'm going to go back to that other color so that we, oh, actually, you know what? No, I wanted blue. Oops, messed up my pattern, but that's okay. It still looks good because because I'm using those analogous colors. And we'll just do a spot of this in between. There you go. Okay, so that was using crayons and oil pastels. So this was the oil pastel, that's the crayon. That's how you can use those to kind of create your lines, which we're going to do with our really pretty bookmarks. So I'm going to let you get some fresh water and we'll be back in just a second. All right, everybody, we are back. Now we're going to move on to making our 3 different bookmarks using these 2 different ideas. So in just a second, we're going to use analogous colors to make 3 different bookmarks. It's going to be super fun. So keep your analogous color sheet handy if you've been making one at home, because we're going to reference it. So the first bookmark is just going to be random lines. So I'm taking my oil pastel. I'm using this so that you all can see it and so I can see it. And all you're going to do is make diagonal lines. You could do zigzags or wavy lines. It doesn't matter. This is just for fun. Here, I'm going to mix it up so you can see. There. Okay. So that's in the first box. And we'll do the second box in just a second. So now that we have our oil pastel drawing, we're going to go back to our analogous colors and we're going to fill that space. So what I want you to do is take your water or take your brush, get it in the water and just wet that surface. If you can't see it, don't worry. We're going to add more paint in just a second, but this is going to help with moving the paint around in that big space. So I'm just wetting it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose some of my analogous colors. So let's do a yellow to green or yellow to blue almost. Okay, so I'm going to start out with my cadmium yellow and I'm going to start in the top left hand corner and I'm just going to start applying paint. See how loose that is? So I'm going to go about maybe a third or halfway. And now I'm going to go switch to a little, let's do a little sap green so it's more gradual. And I'm going to paint right on top where I already painted. Go up a little bit and then go down. And what that is doing is it's blending into the yellow, which I can add a little more of because it's not that dark. Now I'm going to go to my darkest green, or almost my darkest. And I'm going to add that and do the same thing I did before. So I'm going to cover up some of that sap green and then I'm drag it back down and get more of that hooker's green to finish it off. And I'm going up into that paint and I can keep adding more if it's not dark enough. So that is your first bookmark of analogous colors. Wash your brush out while that's drying. We are going to use our oil pastel to paint, not to paint, but to draw circles inside this sheet. Okay, so the second bookmark, we're going to play around a little bit. I love tracing things. So I'm going to use something round and I'm going to trace circles all over that bookmark. Do that. How about I do the inside and the outside of this one? That'll look cool. Okay, and let's do a big one here. Not too many if your circle is small. All right, that looks good. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. So you can wet your surface first, or if you're quick about it, just go in and paint right away. So I'm going to get my clean brush. Let's do purple because I'm just feeling purpley today. Let's start with purple. And if you look at your cheat sheet right here, so we can either go this way to red. How about we do that? That'll be fun. We'll start with purple and then get closer to this kind of red orange. But we'll stop it. Red. Okay. I just love how this shows up. So bright. Now I'm going to do the same thing. So I mixed in a little bit of my alizarin crimson into that purple, before applying it, and then I keep doing it as I go down. Now you're going to notice, see how my brush was dragging a little bit? That's because I didn't wet the surface first before I started painting. So that's kind of the benefit of gently wetting it before you start. And I would say, you can see in my brush, this is my regular Princeton Heritage brush. I'm going to have to wash this out with some soap later because it is getting stuck in the bristles. Now the trick is just to add soap in your hand like this, if this happens to you, when your brush is almost dry, because water doesn't mix with oil, or like the oil pastel that's in there. So to get that out, you want to do it just like you would if you were washing out oil paint from your brush. Start with just soap and your brush, your dirty brush. Then after it gets really soapy, then you clean it with water. Okay, quick little tip. Let's go back. I'm painting with my alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson. And as I get down to the bottom, I'm going to move on to my warmer red, which is my cadmium red. Now, here's another cool thing that you could do. So you could leave it as is, or if you want to have a little bit more fun with it, now that we have our gradient of analogous colors, you could go in each one of these shapes while it's still wet and paint a little bit on top. It's kind of cool. Pretty fun. Okay, now for our last one, let's see if I can remember. Oh, my last one is when we use a template. So kind of like your circle that we trace, this is just, we're going to do a leaf template. And all I did is I drew a leaf and then I cut it out. I just drew it on some used, you know, just some watercolor paper that I wasn't going to use again because it's kind of stiff and sturdy. You're going to do the same thing. Okay, how about we do just one more? Changing angles up. All right, now same deal. I'm going to paint that with a little bit of water. If you have a spray bottle, this is where that would come in handy, so you don't get more of that on more of the oil pastel on your brush. Or like I said, just don't use a brush that you care about. Now what we're going to do, let's use analogous colors, and then we're going to build up from light to dark. So we're going to take this one a step further than we did the other two. So now I'm going to use a little bit of lemon yellow. See how this goes. I want this one to be very dark. And I'm going to paint this all over the whole thing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go one step. I'm going to keep getting it darker and darker. I said I was going to do green, but I'm going to go to red. Now I'm going to try to identify some of these shapes and only paint inside of the shapes. If you go over it, that's okay. And is there another one somewhere? Oh, I should have done another one over here. I'm just going to do the edge. Okay, now I'm going to get another color, another analogous color. I'm going to make it a little bit more orange. And I'm going to paint a shape again. So you can see I painted this shape, I painted this shape. Now I'm going to paint this one. And remember, it doesn't matter if they overlap. I'll wash my brush out. Now I'm going to use a little bit of my red in that mix. And let's paint this shape. And how about this shape? There you go. So another use of the analogous colors, but just a little bit different than our gradients here. But all of them are pretty quick, very simple, and I think pretty fun. I'm going to lift that. So I hope you have a ton of fun with this. This is, like I said, you could really do just about anything. And then when you're done, take the tape off and you have 3 really pretty bookmarks. So that is your lesson on analogous colors using oil pastels and crayons to create a resist. And also a cool activity where you got to make a bookmark. So that was quite the lesson. I hope you subscribe and stick around because I have more fun coming. I will see you next time. Happy painting.